All right, this will be lecture 1 for the cardiovascular system. Here are a few root words that will be really helpful as you're working your way through this unit. If you see that prefix cardi, that's going to mean heart. If you see the vascule, as in vasculature, that means vessel. Brady means slow. Tachy means fast. Systole means to contract. Diastole means to dilate. And syn means working together, as in like synthesis. So the function of the cardiovascular system is going to be to transport materials in blood. Blood's going to contain nutrients, oxygen, waste, carbon dioxide, heat, hormones, immune cells, etc. We talked a little bit about this in the blood lecture. The structures of the cardiovascular system are going to be the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. And we already talked about the blood in our previous lecture. So let's talk about our structures a little bit. First, we're going to talk about the heart. The function of the heart is to pump. It has to maintain pressure to pump blood all the way through the blood vessels and through your whole body. As far as structure, it is going to be a very muscular organ. If you were in lab this week, you know very well how muscular this is. It was very tricky to cut through. It's going to be made up of 4 chambers and 4 valves. It is about the size of 2 fists clasped together. Here is a picture to help you with your studying that just has the different major landmarks that we're going to want to remember, like our superior vena cava, our aorta over here, our pulmonary artery, pulmonary trunk is back here flowing into the lungs. And then let's spin it around here. We can see a little bit better. So here's our backside. You can see here a better view of your pulmonary arteries. And then we are going to have our left ventricle, the apex of the heart, the right ventricle, and then you have your right and your left atria. And then you also have your coronary sinuses and veins and all that kind of stuff down here. So as far as the location of the heart, it is in a location that we call the mediastinum. This is going to be a section of the thoracic cavity right here in the middle between each lung. It's going to contain the heart, the great vessels, the trachea, the esophagus, quite a few major nerves, and the definition of this word just means midway. As you can see, it's very much in the middle of the chest. So the heart wall is going to have a few different layers, and it is going to have a sac that goes all the way around the outside of it. This double-walled sac that protects the heart and secretes serous fluid to prevent friction as the heart beats is going to be called the pericardium. If you remember from our previous lectures, peri means around, and we talked earlier about how card or cardium means heart. So this literally means around the heart. Here is a picture of what this looks like. Again, with more labeling, I put this in here primarily just to help you with your studying. Let's talk a little bit about the layers of the heart wall. So at this point, we're inside that sac. We're actually in the heart tissue. So the very first outer layer is going to be the epicardium. This is technically part of the pericardium. Once we get a little bit deeper in, we get into the myocardium. This is going to be the middle layer. This is the big, thick, muscular layer that we cut through in lab. And then the endocardium is going to be an inner layer of endothelial tissue that lines the inside of the heart. And there's some arrows there showing you which is which. So we have the epicardium up here, the myocardium in the middle, and the endocardium on the inside. So the area that is making contact with the blood. Here are a few examples of some infections and inflammations that can happen with the heart. Pericardial effusion is whenever we have an excess buildup of fluid in the pericardium. And endocarditis is inflammation of that endocardium. This is typically caused by infection. We can also have myocarditis. This is going to be inflammation of the myocardium or that muscle tissue that's going to make up that inside. All right, let's talk a little bit about our heart chambers. So blood is going to enter from the superior vena cava. This is going to be deoxygenated blood coming from our venous system. It is going to enter into the right atrium, go through the tricuspid valve, and into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, this deoxygenated blood is going to be pumped into the pulmonary artery and into the lungs to be oxygenated. At that point, it's going to come back through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. The left atrium is going to receive the oxygenated blood from the lungs, and then it is going to pump it through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle will then pump that oxygenated blood into the aorta, so up here, and then out to the body. So when the left ventricle is sending it up through the aorta, it's going through this aortic valve right here and then out. We have a few different major blood vessels here that are very, very important and connected to the heart. The vena cava is where the blood is going to enter the heart from the body. We have a superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Remember, this is the one that we received it to the right atrium through. Then we have the aorta. The blood is going to leave the heart towards the body from the aorta. The pulmonary arteries are going to help the blood leave the heart and go towards the lungs. So remember, this is going to be deoxygenated blood. And then the pulmonary veins are going to bring back the oxygen blood, and so that blood can enter and then eventually go out into the body in its oxygenated state. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I have your different vessels and areas of the heart highlighted here according to if they're handling deoxygenated blood, which would be in blue, or if they have oxygenated blood, which would be in red. So when we did our dissections, you probably noticed there was a drastic difference in the thickness of the cardiac muscle between the right and the left ventricles. The reason for that is because the left ventricle is pumping blood to the entirety of the body, whereas the right ventricle just has to pump it up through those pulmonary vessels and into the lungs. So it doesn't have to have quite as much force to get it there. Let's talk about our heart valves. Valves in the heart are going to prevent backflow. So it's going to keep that blood from flowing backwards and messing up this system. The tricuspid valve is going to be between the right atrium and the right ventricle, so right here. The pulmonary valve is between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. The bicuspid or mitral valve is going to be between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And the aortic valve is going to be from the left ventricle to the aorta. You probably saw these whenever we did our dissection. They look very weird and they're very hard to miss. I pointed them out to quite a few of you. These are little collagen protein fibers, which are going to anchor those valve flaps in their closed positions. This is colloquially known as the heartstrings. Usually whenever we hear a heart murmur, that is due to one or more of the valves not functioning properly. So it can be these heartstrings that are not quite holding everything in the position that it needs to be in. And lastly, let's talk about blood supply to the heart itself, because the blood is a big pump, right? But the blood within the heart is not being used by the heart just because the blood flows through it. The blood needs its own system of arteries and veins to keep it vascularized and keep blood coming to nourish that muscle tissue. We call these coronary arteries and cardiac veins. These provide the blood to the heart muscle itself. Because our heart muscle needs oxygen too, right? That is all for lecture 1. Remember, for this week, you will have a blood lecture, then you will have lecture 1 on cardiac and lecture 2 on cardiac. So please don't miss any of those. If you have any questions or need any help, please just let me know.